If a child you know gets injured, hurt in some way, should they get care or should we just let the injury heal on its own? Hi, I'm Dr. Jim Hoven of Ramos Law and your host of Health Matters. Today we're going to talk about what to do for those kids in your life that get hurt and what to do about it. Stay tuned. There's nothing so painful for a parent or any adult for that matter as seeing a child get injured. But oftentimes we don't really know what to do, right? Because their bones are so soft and their muscles rebound so quick, so we're not sure, should we take our child to the doctor? Well, I'd like to try to sort that out for you a little bit today because not every injury needs a medical visit. But on the other side, we don't want to miss something that could affect that child's life in not only the short term, but also in the long term, even into adulthood. So here's a couple things to know about child injuries. Number one, if you see a lot of bruising around an area at a joint, that's a good idea that there might be at minimum a joint sprain, and it's always a good idea to get that checked out by a provider, as opposed to if you see a bruise or discoloration on a muscle. If it's kind of like, for example, in the arm, if it's in the middle of the arm and it's bruised and a little bit swollen, and the shot was some sort of a concussion or a concussive force or a trauma to this area, then probably nothing to worry about. But you want to always monitor any injury, whether it's adult or a child, and see what it's doing. Any injury that's progressing and getting better naturally, okay, you can give it a little bit more time. But if it's not progressing or if it's getting worse over a reasonable amount of time, that's the time to get the child in. Now, if we saw that same bruising and swelling and redness and heat over a joint area after a trauma, then that's a good idea to get that child in to make sure that the growth plate, which is part of the bone that's going to determine future growth and future bone health, we want to make sure that wasn't injured. So that's a good time to get the child in for care. Also, if the child is complaining and there's a chronic fever and the child's complaining of not being able to sleep and just being irritated for an extended period of time, and there is again an elevation temperature, a fever, that's a time to go get that child checked out. So there's a few things that you want to do to look for, like fever, like chronic swelling, like increased swelling over the body region. So in other words, instead of it staying in a short spot, it goes larger and larger and larger. That would be a place to get something checked out. Obviously, if you see a disformed limb, meaning that there is a fracture, if it just looks like there's a lump that shouldn't be there, that would be another time to get the child in. But other than that, if you're seeing the child being in a situation where they're in pain, but it's not irretractable pain, meaning that it comes and goes, that they're able to sleep, that they're able to eat, their appetite is normal, they're drinking enough, that everything seems to be good and that they're on the mend, then that's a good time to use common sense stuff like rest, ice, making sure that you have a joint supported, that you're not injuring something by increased mobilization, that kind of thing. So those are just a few tips to know if a child gets injured, should they go to the doctor? Because they don't all heal on their own. Thank goodness they heal way faster than adults, but we do want to make sure we take care of their little bodies just as good as we would take care of our own. So if you have any more questions about child injuries or child health care, please feel free to reach out to me, jim@ramoslaw.com, and I'll be happy to help in any way that I can. Until next time, remember, your health matters.